In 2000, in Cochabamba, Bolivia, a schoolteacher named Maria unfolded a water bill at her kitchen table and stopped speaking. The bill was 180 Bolivianos. A month earlier, it had been 60. She held the paper in both hands while her husband stood beside the sink, turning the faucet off between dishes because they were already behind on rent. Outside, a neighbor was filling plastic buckets from a shared tap in the street. Inside, Maria was doing arithmetic. Water or food? Water or medicine? Water or school supplies? One bill. 3 impossible choices. The official story was simple. Privatization would modernize the city. New pipes. Better access. More efficiency. But something stranger was happening underneath. A foreign consortium had taken control of the municipal water system under a 40-year concession. Suddenly, the rain falling on rooftops no longer fell free. Families feared they could eventually be charged for collecting it. Farmers feared irrigation permits would disappear. Entire neighborhoods realized they were not customers anymore. They were captives. That was the moment people discovered the difference between water existing and water being legally accessible. And once that distinction appeared, it spread everywhere. Because the modern water market is not really about rivers, lakes, or rainfall. It is about paper, a permit filed decades ago. An old concession contract, a groundwater right tied to land somebody bought cheap 20 years earlier, a municipal deal signed by people who no longer live there. The public believes water belongs to nature. Institutions understand it belongs to whoever controls the legal pathway between the source and the tap. That hidden rule is already changing life far beyond Bolivia. Cochabamba looked extreme because it was visible. Most modern water conflicts do not look like riots. They look like legal notices, permit hearings, and dry wells. In parts of the American West, homeowners have discovered they can own 10 acres of land and still be denied the legal right to drill a well. Farmers can sit above an aquifer and still lose access because a corporation with deeper wells and older rights can drain the water table first. You can own the dirt. You can pay the property taxes. You can maintain the fence, the road, the barn, the house, and still not control the water underneath it. That is the contradiction most people do not see coming, because people think water scarcity looks like drought. Usually, it looks like paperwork. One signature, one permit denial, one industrial well, one dry faucet. The water is still there, but it belongs to somebody else. And for millions of Americans, that discovery is starting to happen in places they thought were immune. By January 2000, the streets of Cochabamba looked normal. The buses still ran. Vendors still sold fruit in the market. Children still walked to school in pressed uniforms carrying plastic backpacks. But inside apartments and small homes across the city, people were standing at kitchen tables with water bills in their hands. Some families saw increases of 100%. Others saw 200%. In a country where many workers earned less than $100 a month, some households were suddenly spending nearly a quarter of their income just to keep water running. One pensioner folded his bill into his coat pocket and walked to the utility office, believing there had been a mistake. There was no mistake. The number was correct. The pension was not. 1 month earlier, he could pay for water, bread, cooking oil, and his blood pressure medication. Now the water bill alone consumed what used to buy 2 weeks of groceries. One electric bill. One prescription bottle. One missed payment. That was the hidden cost of privatization. It was not just higher prices. It was the destruction of the margin people lived on. Officials promised modernization. They promised new pipes, cleaner delivery systems, less waste. For a brief moment, that sounded reasonable. Many people believed the old system was broken anyway. Water shortages were common. Entire neighborhoods had unreliable service. Some families stored backup water in blue plastic barrels because they never knew when the taps would stop. Then came the sharper reveal. The contract did not just hand over existing infrastructure. It gave the private operator control over future water access across the region. That included wells. That included irrigation systems. That included rainwater collection in some interpretations of the legal framework. People who had been surviving outside the formal system suddenly feared they would lose that too. A woman with a tin roof and a rain barrel in her yard was no longer just poor. She was potentially illegal. That was the moment the city understood what had really changed. Water was no longer being treated as a shared necessity. It was being treated as a billable event. Every bucket, every pipe, every drop. The protests started with handwritten signs and blocked roads. Then came tear gas. Then rubber bullets. Then martial law. By April 2000, one teenager was dead, hundreds were injured, and the city was effectively in revolt. People were not rioting because they hated paying bills. They were rioting because they understood something more dangerous. If someone can charge you for the rain, they can charge you for survival. And that same logic now exists far beyond Bolivia, because across the American West, the most important asset is no longer the land itself. It is the paper right attached to the water underneath it. That is why the most dangerous water shortages rarely begin with empty reservoirs. They begin in county offices, zoning boards, and court filings. In 2014, in California's Central Valley, a farmer could still drive past green almond groves, full canals, and irrigation pivots spraying water across fields. From the road, it looked normal. Then he opened the report from his well contractor. The water table had dropped another 30 feet. To keep pumping, he would need to deepen the well. Cost $80,000. He stood beside his pickup truck, holding the estimate while looking across the road at an industrial farm that had already drilled a deeper well months earlier. They could afford another rig. He could not. The land looked alive. The balance sheet was dead. That is the hidden fragility most people never see. They think owning land means owning the water beneath it. In many jurisdictions, it does not. Water rights do not always stay attached to the land. They can be sold, leased, pledged as collateral, or transferred somewhere else entirely. That means a family can own 40 acres, pay taxes for decades, and still discover the real legal priority belongs to someone who filed paperwork 50 years earlier. Belief: the person above the aquifer controls it. Reality: the person with the older permit, the deeper well, or the better lawyer controls it. And when scarcity arrives, the sequence is brutally predictable. The large operator drills deeper. The municipality imposes restrictions. The small landowner gets a notice. No lawn watering, no garden irrigation, no livestock expansion, no secondary dwelling permit. Then the well starts coughing air. One family in rural Arizona spent $27,000 drilling a new residential well after the original one ran dry. 6 months later, the neighboring industrial operation expanded again. The replacement well failed too. 2 wells, 2 loans, 2 dry holes in the ground. The family kept the house, but they lost the reason they bought it. That is what makes water different from almost every other commodity. You can postpone replacing a car. You can stretch groceries for another week. You can cut pills in half. You cannot negotiate with thirst. And once water rights become detached from land, ordinary people enter a game they were never designed to win. Because the people buying these rights are not thinking in terms of seasons. They are thinking in terms of decades. A hedge fund can wait 10 years for scarcity. A retired couple with 1 pension check and 1 property tax bill cannot. And that is exactly why institutional investors have become so interested in water rights. Because unlike oil, housing, or farmland, water becomes more valuable every year. People keep treating it like it is free. In 2022, outside of Visalia, California, David stood in the middle of his almond orchard with a shovel in his hand and dry soil breaking apart beneath his boots. His grandfather bought the farm in 1958. His father expanded it in the 1980s. David inherited 140 acres, a tractor, a rusted toolbox, and a belief that if you worked hard enough, the land would take care of you. Now he was watching trees die in rows, not because there was no water, because somebody else could reach it first. 2 years earlier, an investment-backed agricultural conglomerate had purchased thousands of acres in the adjoining valley. Soon after, they drilled multiple industrial wells more than 1,000 feet deep. The pumps ran day and night. David's well was 340 feet. By the end of the summer, it was pulling mud. He called the drilling company and got the same answer everyone else was getting. 8-month waiting list. Estimated replacement cost, $120,000. No guarantee of success. He went back inside the house and placed the estimate beside the property tax bill on the kitchen counter. His wife was already cutting grocery trips in half. Their oldest son had postponed community college to work part-time. Repairs on the pickup truck had been delayed twice. The farm still looked valuable from the road. The orchard was green in places. The house was standing. The equipment was parked in the barn, but inside the checking account, the future had already collapsed. Across the road, the industrial farm kept planting new trees. Their pumps were still running. They were not reacting to scarcity. They were buying it before everyone else could feel it. That is how aquifer depletion appears in ordinary life. Not as a dramatic disaster movie, as postponement, postponed repairs, postponed school, postponed medical visits, postponed retirement. One dry well can become a second mortgage. One deeper well can become 5 more years of debt. One season without water can erase 3 generations of work. And the worst part is that the people losing first are usually the people who did everything right. They bought land. They avoided debt. They saved for bad seasons. They thought preparation would be enough. But they were planning for weather. They were not planning for a financialized water market where deeper pockets can legally drain a shared aquifer faster than ordinary people can defend it. That is the hidden rule. Scarcity does not have to be absolute. It only has to be unequal. Because once one side can afford deeper wells, better lawyers, longer permits, and years of waiting, the other side starts selling things. First the equipment, then the land, then the future they thought they owned. Because to Wall Street, a dry well is not just a local tragedy. It is a pricing opportunity. By late 2020, water had reached Wall Street. Not pipes, not reservoirs, not treatment plants, water futures. For the first time, investors could trade contracts tied to the future price of water in California, betting on scarcity the same way they bet on oil, wheat, or copper. That sounds abstract until you realize what it means. Somewhere, a trader in Manhattan can profit from the same drought that destroys David's orchard. One screen shows a blue line moving upward. Another man is standing in a dry field holding a $120,000 drilling estimate beside his property tax bill. That is the contradiction. For one side, water scarcity is a thesis. For the other side, it is a funeral for a way of life. And the investors are not necessarily villains. That is what makes this more dangerous. A pension fund manager in Toronto is trying to generate a 7% annual return so retired teachers can receive their checks. An endowment manager is looking for inflation-resistant assets. A hedge fund is searching for something with stable demand and limited supply. Water fits perfectly. People can cancel vacations. They can postpone buying a car. They can stop eating at restaurants. They cannot stop drinking. That is why water rights, reservoirs, farmland above aquifers, and utility infrastructure are increasingly attractive to institutional money. In a world of unstable bonds, inflated housing markets, and volatile stocks, water looks safe. But what looks safe to investors often feels like dependence to everyone else. In 2023, one family in Rio Verde foothills, Arizona, watched water trucks stop arriving after a supply agreement collapsed. Hundreds of homes suddenly had no reliable water access. Families rationed showers, postponed laundry, and watched savings disappear into emergency deliveries costing hundreds of dollars a month. One woman stood in her driveway beside a plastic storage tank, wearing a winter coat over her pajamas, waiting for a truck that might not arrive until midnight. The mortgage was still due, the property taxes were still due, the water was gone. That is the hidden cost of turning water into an asset class. The more profitable scarcity becomes, the less incentive there is to solve it quickly. A city can delay repairs. An investor can hold permits off the market. A utility can raise rates 8%, then 12%, then another 15% a few years later. And they still know customers cannot walk away. Because unlike a phone company or a streaming service, water has no substitute. Families can skip vacations, delay repairs, stretch groceries, cut pills in half, but they cannot choose not to use water. And that means the people trapped first are usually the people with the fewest options. Renters, retirees, small farmers, rural homeowners, people already living on narrow margins with fixed incomes, rising bills, and no room for another increase. And once water becomes something investors can profit from, the question is no longer whether prices will rise. It is how many people will be priced out before anyone decides the system has gone too far. That is why the people who adapt first are usually not the richest. They are the people who understand the difference between owning an asset and controlling a necessity. A large retirement account cannot irrigate a garden. A rising home value cannot fill a bathtub. A paid-off house means very little if the well runs dry and the utility rate doubles every 3 years. The number stayed the same. The purchasing power disappeared. That is the final contradiction. Many families think they are preparing because they have equity, savings, insurance, and land. But if all of those things depend on a single vulnerable water source, then they are not resilient. They are concentrated. And concentrated systems break faster than people expect. That is why what survives historically is usually simple, redundant, and local. One property in a jurisdiction where water rights remain attached to the land. One backup cistern. One gravity-fed tank. One legal well permit. One rain catchment system that does not rely on monthly deliveries, municipal approval, or a truck arriving before midnight. The system is difficult to fix because too many institutions benefit from scarcity. Cities need revenue. Utilities need rate increases. Investors need yield. Politicians need short-term solutions that last until the next election cycle. Meanwhile, ordinary people are left standing in kitchens, staring at bills, trying to understand why something as basic as water suddenly feels uncertain. The families who get trapped are usually the ones who assume the old rules still apply. The adaptable families are the ones who quietly build redundancy before they are forced to, because when pressure finally arrives, there is very little time to improvise. One permit denial, one dry summer, one deeper industrial well, and suddenly the land still belongs to you, but the water does not. If you want the practical blueprint, start with the legal structure. Study jurisdictions where water rights remain attached to the land. Understand exactly what comes with a property before you buy it. Then build redundancy early. A legal well, rain capture, stored reserves, multiple layers of filtration, because in the end, resilience is not about owning more. It is about depending on less. The account can be full, the land can be paid off, the house can be beautiful, and one day you can still stand at the kitchen sink, turn the handle, and hear nothing.